My goal today is to share with you different types of learnings, both on the personal sides, the personal dimension of the life of a founder and the different decisions they have to make in their career, both when they start, when to focus full-time, and also when to branch out, but also about more business questions, business considerations, I would say, around go-to-market, going up market, selling in very competitive markets, etc., etc. I would say that these questions, both on the personal and the business side, correspond really well to my interest, since these are the two things that I care the most about and I'm the most passionate about. So it's probably not a surprise that this is what I chose. So I hope you'll find it useful. And now let's go to my 4 takeaways. In this episode, I'm actually by myself, and I want to share a little bit some of the lessons learned from the first 8-9 episodes we did so far of a podcast. I wanted to especially to start about some traditional key challenges that most indie founders face when they're launching a product and they want to grow that product, and bring some of my takeaways from the different people that I've interviewed so far. The first one, which often comes in most discussions, is around when do you go solo and full-time on your project versus do the indie project as a side hustle. One thing that struck me from most of the conversations so far is that it's actually way more comfortable to start as a side hustle and to build your product slowly but surely that way until you get to a revenue range that you feel comfortable with, that you feel real traction, and then take the leap and start full time. We've seen people that have done differently, some people that have been part of a podcast, some people that will be future guest or existing guest, but we haven't published the episode. For example, the Scraping Bee founders, they started for 2 years almost by themselves, doing solo, but it was really hard and stressful for them. And I don't think that it added so much value to their experience, but it was worth the hassle. Also, Mark Liu famously has been struggling for years before hitting the right chord and being successful. Again, I don't think that starting a company is painful. You don't need necessarily more pain for the sake of it to be successful. So I think that the main takeaway I get from all the episodes is that it's best when you can launch your project as a side hustle, learn from it, see what takes off. And then when you really see it take off, you can make a jump and focus on it. So that's, I would say, the first takeaway and maybe the first lesson I've learned from the 9-10 conversations I've had so far with founders. The Centric experience was a little bit different because the founders were students, but I would say that the studying was their main job, and they never fully abandoned it. I mean, Eric, when he sold the business to us, was a PhD student. So in a way, Centric was still a side hustle for him, even at $25,000 in MRR. So I would say that's number one. Number one piece of advice so far is clear. It's better for indie to bootstrap first as their business as a side hustle. And then when you reach some kind of traction, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, whatever, $10,000, then maybe is the time to say, okay, I'm going to apply myself to this opportunity and just push as much as I can. In that sense, it's interesting to see how different it is from venture, where most founders, they actually go solo. They leave their company, they build their product and their startup. But I also would say that because they raise money, they don't necessarily have the same issue with income, because even if they raise a couple $100,000, they can pay themselves a little bit and be what was called ramen profitable. So that's number one takeaway. The second big takeaway is that oftentimes indie founders launch businesses in very crowded markets. Scraping Bee launched their product in the scraping API world, which has many, many competitors. TinyHost also launched a product with many competitors. Pauline with Ayakrea, she has, obviously it's a kind of a copy of one of Peter Level's company in the interior design space, but even in France, her original market, there is at least one company that I've seen that is a direct competitor. So they indeed don't shy away from competition. Sales Robot, talk to me about competition, about LinkedIn automation. There are maybe 20 or 50 tools. But I think that the reason, what is interesting with all these founders is that most of them were able to thrive thanks to owning to a very specific go-to-market strategy. It could be around SEO, like for example, Scraping Bee founders, they had a specific blog and audience around scraping, as they've been working on that niche for years before starting Scraping Bee. I would say also Pauline with Ayakrea, she has also a very big X audience, and that she's leveraging for her business. Even though her audience is not necessarily in her same market, she has leveraged that audience a lot. Centric, TinyHost also benefited a lot from SEO, and they double and triple down on it. So SEO, building in public, like also Screenshot One, Dimitro did, and content, which is linked to SEO, but there's also a notion of expertise. When you've been in a space, when people come to you already because they know you're an expert in that space, and then you launch a product in that category, even though your audience is not very big, you have a lot of credibility that helps with your indie project. So I would say that, that's something that I found interesting, because these people have been able to build significant businesses on top of small but very targeted channels. Sorav from Sales Robot also build it on top of, thanks to customers, and the feedback of customers in different Facebook groups of a competitor of his. Talk about a niche audience. And Dropping Blog, the founder built something on top of his agency work. So in a way, either you start from an audience like Scraping Bee, like Sales Robot, like Dropping Blog, where they started with an audience and they expanded from there, or you start a product that is horizontal enough and you can leverage SEO to your advantage, which has been the case of Centric, of TinyHost, of Ayakrea, also to some degree, etc., etc. So, takeaway number 2, really thinking about your audience from the get-go. And it's striking to me that none of these founders, they threw spaghetti to the wall and tried many different go-to-market strategies. They really focused on one and made sure it worked as fast as they could. And then after that, maybe they layered on other channels, but they didn't do a landing page and do a Google ads and then Facebook ads and then like 20 different things. They knew, in a way, they knew how they wanted to grow that business, either through pre-existing assets or through more traditional assets like SEO, but they really doubled down, tripled down on it very quickly. And that's how they were able to get a good position even in very competitive markets. Centric has 5 or 6 direct competitors. Sales Robot has 50. Drop-in Blog has several as well, etc., etc. The third takeaway for me, or the third thing I wanted to talk to you about today, was about going up market. At some point, most of these founders, because of their go-to-market motions, because they haven't raised money and so they need to focus on very capital efficient sales, they start with SMBs, sometimes even prosumers. But at some point knocks at the door a bigger company that wants something a little bit different and a little bit unique. And if there is one takeaway from every conversation, whether we're looking at David who worked at Notion and Typeform, or our experience at Centric, the experience from Kevin from Scraping Bee, many others, is that one, if you think about enterprise, you need to think about the product as a separate entity. You don't even have to look at your current product table. You have to say, okay, what is it that they really want and need to buy our product? And many times it has nothing to do with features, or at least with software features. It has to do with procurement features, security features, etc., etc. So that's obviously, it's not an unknown thing, but it's something that, as founders, even founders at Notion, they initially didn't think that enterprise and larger teams were so different, and they didn't design their enterprise product the right way. And it's really when they focus on asking themselves, okay, what do I really care if I'm an enterprise? I mean, I might care a little bit about these additional features, like an integration or whatever, but what I really want is security, so that I'm not losing my job, I'm not losing my data. I want compliance with my procurement process. And maybe because this software is going to be used by a lot of people, I need some kind of very complex account management, so that my product can be used either by multiple teams or by multiple people in a similar team, etc., etc. And so that's the first item of a framework, which is really saying, putting that product aside and focusing on enterprise needs. And then when it comes to pricing, in many ways, the pricing doesn't really matter. I often say, I had this joke earlier in my career that said that sometimes when you're selling a $20,000 software to a big company, I mean, for you, it's a lot of money, especially as an indie, but for them, it's probably less money that they're discretionary spending on food and beverage for a team for the whole quarter, especially in big companies. I mean, they do offsites, they do small, weekend lunch or weekday lunch, sorry. They do beers, they do croissant breakfast mornings, whatever. Like the amount of money that they spend for that on a quarterly basis for even a team of 100, 200 people in a big company is probably less than your software. And so as a consequence, the price of your software doesn't really matter as long as it does what they want. So the fact that it's $20,000 a year, but you will go through the hoops of a purchase order number or you're doing compliance the right way, etc., is nothing to them, even though they could buy similar features for $800 a year or $1,000 a year on your website. And so the fact that the price is independent of the value of what you consider as value is incredibly important, and is the number one takeaway from all conversations we've had with either in the debrief or in the board sessions from different co-hosts. You need to price your product higher, especially on the enterprise side, because enterprise customers don't really care as much as they're having value, and you're complying with the different hoops that they'll ask you to go through in order for them to be successful. So that's my third takeaway from today. And now, in terms of surprises or other tidbits that I thought were interesting, yeah, I mean, I think that they were. We've had conversations with the founder, with Pauline from IA Crea, and also with Dimitro and John Rush about Screenshot One. And one thing that indie often ask themselves at some point when their products reach a certain threshold, and especially when they have done it through building in public, and so they start to have an audience of 10,000, 20,000 other typically aspiring founders, is that they ask themselves, oh, what if I build a second product? And it starts to get in their head as, should I do it and should I not do it? And I think that my conversation with Dimitro and John was very interesting in that regard for two reasons. One is that typically the ones that are doing that right, like Thibaut, for example, who started Taplio, or even Pauline, the way they do it is that for the first product, maybe they're the developer, but the second, third, or others, they're not. They have a co-maker that is making the product for them in the background. John Rush, has many co-makers for a lot of his projects, for example. And so their job is more around orchestration and marketing and less about product building. Sometimes they're very involved in the specs, but really their main job is to be the brand conduit to get the product traction. So that's one thing. And it's true that for some people like Dimitro or others who are product builders, who like the craft, who like building themselves, it can feel frustrating because on the one hand, they could distribute other people's products. They have the audience. Dimitro has tens of thousands of followers on X, for example. He posts regularly also on LinkedIn. But they don't want to do it because in many ways, it's doing something that they don't like, which is kind of selling to their audience versus sharing, building yourself, loving the craft. And so I think that you will have this differentiation or these differences between the profiles and also the interest of a different indie founders. That's my fourth takeaway. At the end of the day, sure, you can make more money, but what you want is to have a lifestyle where you are doing day to day what you want to do, because whether you're making $20,000 a month or 30 or 40, in most cases, not if you're living in San Francisco, but in most places, it's a lot of money anyway. And liking your craft is better than grinding for some people, whereas others, John, Pauline, myself to some degree, we like the diversity and we like multiplying the project so that we can be involved in many things and solving different types of problems on a daily basis. So that, I think, is a very personal decision and something that should not be overlooked. So these are the four tidbits that I wanted to share with you today as my main takeaways from our conversation. The first one is what is the best path to launching an indie project in a way that doesn't make you sweat too much? The second one is around thinking about how do people that work in red ocean markets were able to grow and build substantial businesses, even though they were competing in substantial markets. The third one is around going up market and how to think about enterprise pricing, especially. And the fourth one is about whether indie should focus on one project or on multiple projects that they run in parallel at the same time. Two of them, as I said, were kind of almost life lessons, and the other two were more business or go-to-market lessons. And that's what I like about this podcast. Indie board session, it's about an indie. An indie is most indies are craftsmen. They're building smaller businesses, but they're putting a lot of their soul into it. And they care, and what they do matters a lot for their lives, because in many ways, it's not a job. It's really a venture. And it's very different in that way from a startup, which becomes very quickly like an enterprise, hopefully, if you're successful. So you're having to deal with, it feels a bit more serious, I would say. And you have actual board members who are talking to you and whispering to your ears about that. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope it was helpful to you. And I'm looking forward to the future 10 episodes of Indie Board Session. We'll have lots of discussions about expanding the team. It's very hard for a founder who's really good at something to expand the team, especially find people that have similar skill set as them. And so that's going to be one topic we're going to discuss a lot in the next few episodes, and there will be more. So stay tuned, subscribe, give us a rating, give us a review, and thank you so much.